Well, one thing I might suggest is having a vision of what they want that relationship with their team members to look like. Because so often what I find is individuals focus on what the problem is or the problem area and not the vision of what they would like to see happen.
This is Lead with Culture. I'm Kate Volman, and on this episode, we are talking about emotional mastery, which is such a great topic, and I'm so excited to dig into it with our senior coach and certified dream manager, Jennifer Fonseca. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks, Kate. It's an honor. Can't wait.
We're going to have such a fun conversation. So just to give a little bit of context for everyone listening, we wanted to do an episode. Obviously, emotional mastery is a great topic. It's also part of our Dream Manager program. It's kind of like a episode for two different reasons. One, we wanted to really kind of dig in and share a little bit of the journey that people go through when they are going through the Dream Manager program, which is a life coaching program for people. So if you're listening, you're going to be able to learn, or you're going to discover some ways to kind of tap into your emotional mastery and also potentially help your people, because the Dream Manager is all about helping people become the best version of themselves in all different areas of life: physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, all of them. So today we're focused on emotional mastery. So Jennifer, why is emotional mastery so important to really even have a conversation about today?
I think we're all designed to belong, to feel connected, to be part of a community. And with emotional mastery, it's not looking through the lens of like a feelings wheel, but really the state, taking honest inventory and accountability for the state of our relationships with others, right? And so I love it because we're in a culture that has become so transactional as opposed to transformational. And when you look at the Dream Manager program as a life coaching curriculum and program, when you're talking with someone and you're talking about their relationships, their state of their relationships, when you are interacting with someone, whether it's the grocery store clerk or whether it's your coworker or your family at home, are they walking away from an interaction with you better or worse? Are they becoming better versions of themselves after an interaction with you? Are you becoming a better version of yourself after an interaction with someone? And so that's one of the key reasons why I think it's so important, because the whole curriculum and program with the Dream Manager is becoming the best version of yourself. And so this is a great way to do an honest examination of how am I in my relationships? Are they becoming better versions? And am I becoming a better version?
Yeah. And it's taking ownership of the relationships in our life, which can be really challenging, right? It's really easy for us to, wait, no, well, I'm doing everything right. It's these people, it's all their problems. No. And this is what I love so much about every aspect of the Dream Manager. It's really around this self-awareness, asking questions and helping people come from these different categories from a different perspective, a little bit more introspective. And I love that you shared, if we all walked around and thought, am I helping somebody? It's like when someone says, I want to leave people and organizations better than when I found them. And if we approach life in that way, in every interaction, wow, we would show up differently. Even if we're just getting a cup of coffee and being able to smile and ask a question when somebody's taking our order, just every area of life. So we're not going to go through the whole session, but let's just kind of highlight some of the components to the emotional mastery, starting with relationship, as you said, which I think is such a great way to open up this session that Matthew put together, but it's such an incredible way to walk through. So talk about the first kind of section in that.
So the first thing that we do, I call it like the mini assessment. So it's the state of the relationship. So people identifying, thinking about 3 great relationships and 3 relationships that need to be improved. Maybe they're currently suffering, or maybe you just would like them to be a little bit better. This is one of the more intense sessions that we take someone through. But the beauty of where it's placed is you've been with someone for 8 months coaching them. And as a coach, you're a keeper of secrets. I've learned about people getting pregnant before their parents have even learned. It's crazy, right? So by the time you hit this, and you're evaluating people's relationships, you've already developed a relationship with the person you're coaching where now they're ready to be a little more vulnerable. And so they're sharing some characteristics of great relationships, why some of their relationships that are suffering or need improvement, like the rift that's happened, what's gone on. So you're just kind of doing like a big high level overview of what's the current state, taking accountability for how have I contributed to why relationships are great or why they need improvement. And having that self-awareness, raising that self-awareness and taking accountability for what is it that I've done on my side of the street that's put a relationship in kind of one category or the other.
What's interesting about this section is going back to the intentionality of it, which is identifying those 3 best relationships, which I think come a little bit easier for people, right? They're like, "Oh, yeah, it's your family, it's your spouse, it's, whatever those 3 relationships." But then it's those relationships that might be suffering a little bit. It's interesting in the sessions because people almost get defensive. "Well, it's not bad." And I'm like, "That's great. We're not saying it's a bad relationship. We're just saying that there's opportunity for growth in relationship." And this could be someone that even a friendship. There's a lot of folks who want to build a deeper friendship with some of the people in their lives.
And oftentimes people are on both lists, right? Like I have a great relationship, but there's this one area. And the thing that I really love about going through this is we're culpable for our part in why the state of either side. When you're coaching someone, right? A lot of times we look at the external factors. If I change this, if they just change this behavior, then the relationship will be totally fine. But that's not how it works. My internal happiness, your internal happiness, satisfaction, whatever, is not dependent on those external factors. So, what's within our locus of control to change that would change or shift those relationships, maximize them to be just a little bit better?
Yeah. So once people identify those different people in their lives, then what are some exercises that we walk people through to help them start to uncover some things that maybe they need to conversations they need to have or different habits that they can be creating in their own life and with relationship with others?
Yes. So we walk individuals through Matthew Kelly's framework of the 7 levels of intimacy, starting with a base level, going up through the 7th level, which is the highest level of intimacy with someone. One of the core things with relationships has to do with communication. So these 7 levels identify kind of levels of communication we have with individuals. And the way that I like to set it up is there's 3 primary things. Like each level has, here's the definition, here's some questions around it to raise your awareness. And then here's the call to action, the action step that will help you to go from lower levels of intimacy, like the cliche level, a facts level, not knowing much. It's, like, hey, how you doing, Kate? And I just keep walking because I'm just asking out of courtesy, but I really don't care because I'm not that invested versus the highest level of legitimate needs where I'm able to articulate, this is what I need and negotiate with you to help meet your needs. So we take individuals through those 7 levels of intimacy, helping them to identify what are some relationships that you'd really like to impact through making some personal changes that would help to just maximize that relationship to be better, to be more transformational, where both parties are becoming better versions of themselves.
So that 7th level of intimacy, which is obviously that legitimate needs, it's really deep. You really know and understand that person. You get that person. And what's really wonderful is that when you start to cultivate those kinds of relationships in your personal life, then they become easier to cultivate in your professional life. You're not gonna maybe go as deep as far as some of the conversations that you have with them, and you're not gonna be talking about past or history type things that wouldn't be appropriate to talk to with some people at work. However, understanding how this works in your personal life, let's talk a little bit about how this happens because we do work with a lot of folks who someone on their list is a coworker or a boss. And how do you really build a deeper relationship with them in an appropriate way so that you do feel like you're more connected?
Right. And I will share, like, very vulnerably, in a past job that I had, there was a rift between my supervisor and I, and everybody knew it. And it didn't matter how much we faked it, everybody knew it. And it wasn't until we brought in a coach to actually help us to change the story or narrative we had about each other, because it's so easy to objectify a person and not see them as a human. So we play the victim, and it's this other coworker or this other person who's incompetent, not doing their job, or unappreciative. But when I started to take personal accountability as a result of the coaching, it changed the whole nature of everything. And that's what I feel like this session does, is helps people to humanize people in their personal and professional life, make the internal changes that they need, and it shifts and changes everything.
Yeah, well, that's a big challenge in the workplace today is that we've not been taught how to have uncomfortable conversations. We haven't been taught how to have that type of dialogue with the people that we work with. And obviously, a lot of people have these different ideas in mind of HR with cancel culture and everything. Like, we don't want to say the wrong thing. We don't want to approach people in the wrong way. And I think that's when it really just comes back to empathy and authenticity and building a lot of trust with people before you have those conversations. So I'm curious then, when you had somebody come in, which obviously is great, you have a third party person coming in to work with you both. What did they do that really helped both of you make that shift?
Part of it was really uncovering what's the story we were telling each other about the other person. And what it uncovered is some huge misperceptions of what was actually going on that caused some very deep pain and hurt. And so, if we look at the 7 levels of intimacy, we were able to get past the cliche level, the facts level, the opinions level. We got into like our fears, our faults, and our failures. We got into really kind of just being honest and vulnerable about what was going on in us and what we thought the other person was intentionally doing, which was not the case. And it cleared a lot of things up. And we were both able to articulate our feelings of hurt or frustration, which had not been voiced before. It made a massive, massive difference. And it's interesting because I hear this with clients, even asking them, when you ask, because one of the levels, the 5th level of intimacy is the feelings level. And even when you ask clients, what's an emotion that may be difficult for you to feel or express? It's not just fear, frustration, or disappointment. It can be joy. It can be above the line. And it's interesting. One client that I worked with, he had a foreman that did not receive feedback at all. And because of that, he just didn't provide feedback, and it was impacting the company. It was impacting the organization. And as a result of going through the 7 levels and recognizing his own frustration, he was able to kind of zoom out and have compassion for the guy, because he realized as a result of going through this session that his foreman was viewing feedback as his identity. So it was, when feedback was given, the person would take it as not, I made a mistake, but I am a mistake, or I failed at something, but I am a failure. And by zooming out and telling himself a new narrative, he was able to then approach the foreman in a different way to provide feedback. It was a recognition of, I need to stop being afraid to talk to this person. I need to understand and have compassion and empathy, like you said, of where he's at, because it's impacting morale, it's impacting the organization. And he was able to have a conversation and be able to remedy that, which that's a game changer in an organization.
Absolutely. And you have to be able to have those kinds of conversations to uncover what those pieces are. That's kind of the first step. The first step is to uncover them, and then you get to work towards them. But that's interesting. We see this a lot, and not just in organizations, but just in people and habits. It's identifying ourselves. Like, if we place this identity, like a lot of people that when they leave their job or if they get laid off, it's kind of their identity is attached to their job instead of, this is why I love a program like Dream Manager, because if our identity is, everything that we're doing is to help us become the best version of ourselves. Our identity is to help us become the best version of it. And for some seasons of life, maybe that has a lot to do with your work. And for some seasons of life, it might be some other things. And it's the same thing with exercise, right? It's that same feeling of, if now our identity is like baked in, I work out X amount of times a day or X amount of times a week or whatever, and then you kind of don't do that, all of a sudden we think, oh my gosh, we're failing, when no, I am the kind of person who believes in my health and fitness, and I do what I can to cultivate that. And so that's a very different way of seeing ourselves. And what I think is so incredible is this really humanizes everyone in this world where I feel like it's really easy to dehumanize people because of so much technology. And when we're humanizing people, we're remembering all these 7 levels. And some people might be thinking, I don't know what the 7 levels are. Well, you need to read Matthew's book, The 7 Levels of Intimacy, to find out all 7. I think it probably wasn't until, this is so sad, like my late 20s that I recognized, oh, my parents are human beings that have hopes and dreams and things. We don't really think about our coworkers sometimes, or the people in our lives have all of these thoughts, fears, emotions. Even when we look at our quote unquote heroes, those people that we maybe follow online and we think they don't have anxiety or stress or fear or doubt or any of the things that you might be dealing with. And then you hear them on a podcast or something and they're like, oh, yeah, I feel that way all the time. Like every time I show up or go down stage or publish my next book. And so just being able to have these open conversations with people is really interesting. What are some other clients that really stand out to you that this session for them? Because Jen and I were talking the other day. We were on a little walk and talk and we're like, which one do you love most? And it's like, there's so many different sessions that impact people in different ways. And so I'm always fascinated by which one, when we're taking people on this journey through Dream Manager, it's like, which session are they going to have the biggest aha moment or breakthrough on?
Right. Well, I had a couple. So one is a story of a client that I worked with, and it was actually, she's a CEO of a company, and it was a relationship with the daughter-in-law. She identified where she was at with the daughter-in-law and where she wanted to be in those 7 levels. And the story she was telling herself, so that's a thing that I often do with my clients is like, what's the story that you're telling yourselves about this? Because that's how we dehumanize other people. We come up with a story that may not be true and we apply it to them. So her story was, her daughter-in-law didn't sit with them at church. And that happens pretty often. And she takes it as she's aloof, she's distant, she doesn't like me. And my client was playing the victim. And when we talked through sort of the 7 levels and I asked some questions around him, like, well, what other story could you tell about what's going on? And really, it's the daughter-in-law had a negative experience growing up with her guardians, her parents, and it's being applied. So my client was able to now have some level of compassion and utilizing some of the tips from the 7 levels of intimacy, go, this is the one that I need to apply to try and strengthen this relationship and garner trust. And it's not that the daughter-in-law is aloof, it's she's hurt, right? Another great client interaction was one of my clients was talking about she has great relationships, work is great, everything's great. But she started to notice she was a little bit frustrated with her supervisor. And what was so fun is we were talking about the highest level of intimacy, which is legitimate needs, right? And so a need is differentiated from a want. I might want certain things, but a need is if I don't have air to breathe, I will die, right? And what's interesting, right, is you think about like, are you actively right now thinking about breathing? Are you actively trying to make your heart beat? Because you need both to survive. No, they're automatic, right? So these are needs that we have, but we don't think about them. And sometimes our own legitimate needs we don't think about. And so my client wasn't thinking about like a legitimate need that she has is a greater amount of communication with her supervisor. And part of it was, and this is the beauty of the Dream Manager program, is in session 5, so 3 sessions prior, we talked about personality. And my client's personality is extroversion. She talks things out. Like she is a verbal processor. She needs to talk it out. She has a high need for verbal communication. And so when we were talking about this is a need that she has, it was like this aha moment that one, it's okay for her to have this as a need, to be highly communicative and to have that communication back. But she was pushing it off as, well, you know, my supervisor is really busy. She has a lot on her plate. And I said, well, it's still a legitimate need of yours, correct? You need communication, one, to do your job effectively. It's by nature how you're designed to have that level of communication. It is okay to advocate for your needs. What's the personality type of your supervisor? She's like, I don't know, but I'm going to go find that out. I need to know. I said, because if her preference is introversion, she's processing everything up in her head and not verbalizing it. And it's not that she doesn't care about you, doesn't like you, but her preference is just different. Her need is different. And so the story my client was telling herself was, well, she's too busy. She doesn't have time. Like, that may not be the story. And have you had a conversation? Does she know what you need? Well, no. I probably need to have a more direct conversation to advocate for myself for what I need. Great. Is that something you can do within the next 7 days? And what's stopping you from having that conversation and talking around that? And so I can't wait till our next session to find out, how did that conversation go? And that was a good relationship. It wasn't a bad relationship. It's a good working relationship, but one that could improve once her legitimate need is expressed and articulated, because people are mind readers. They don't know what we need.
What did she say when you asked what's stopping her from having that conversation?
She just hadn't really thought about it. She was just continuing to tell herself the story. Everyone's just really busy. There isn't time. And that's why. So it was this story that she's made up in her head. But when we talked about personality and personality differences, going back to session 5, it made sense to her that there's a possibility that exists that her supervisor may not be as expressive or need the same level of communication as she does. And neither's right or wrong. They just are.
I often wonder how many people are putting so much more stress and anxiety on themselves in so many different relationships. They're so certain this is the way this person is thinking about me. And I actually had a call today. Somebody was going into a job interview and he said, "Hey, do you mind? Can we have a little chat?" So I'm talking to him and he was basically saying, "I know it's going to be really hard to impress this guy, and he's going to ask me this, and he's going to want to know this." I just let him go and talk it all through. And I said, "Do you want to know what I just heard? A lot of assumptions. A lot of assumptions, because this is how you would interview the person. This is what you would be looking for." I said, "You have no idea if this person is even a good interviewer. And so what can you do? All you can do is prepare, show up with great questions, know what you're talking about." So we have to focus on what we can control. And what we can control is identifying our needs and then going to another person and laying that out and saying, "Hey, this is what I need." And what's so beautiful about this is we get to say, "This is really what I need." Even what we do at Floyd, do you have what you need to succeed? Like, do you have everything that you need? And when we offer that question up to the people that we're working with, they can then come back and say, "Oh, wait a second, do I?" And then they can actually think about it and then decide, "Oh, I actually really do need more communication with you." Or it's not required that I have this type of communication. When we look through these sessions, and make no mistake, Matthew was very intentional about the order in which we go through each of these sessions so that they all build on each other and you get to grow personally, professionally. But man, this one is so interesting because you really do uncover so much and you recognize how much of our world we see through our own lens, even when we don't want to. Like, even when we think we're trying not to, it can be so hard because we come from life knowing only what we know and what we've experienced.
Well, and even the other little thing is how we dehumanize others. And it's not just like the person we see casually, like the people at work that we see every day and interact with every day. It's easy to become the victim and put blame on them and make it very transactional. But when the nature of the relationship change, when I change, when the person takes accountability for their own actions, like ask someone to do something for you, by nature of your role, they're going to do it. Right. But if there's a little more of a relationship established where you're treated with appreciation, where you're really valuing people for being human, having human dignity and worth, then when you ask for that thing, that report or whatever it is, how much more above and beyond am I going to do? What's the difference in the product that you're going to get as a result of having that more human interaction where I'm not just a transactional report giver, maker. The result will be different and everybody leaves better.
Yeah. And this is a question we get asked a lot. So, for a lot of leaders, they say, well, not why should I care about my people's dreams, but it's almost they feel like they don't want to pry. They kind of think, well, I don't want to get too personal. Is it too personal to discover the dreams of my people? Like, why is that important to me as a leader to dig into our people's dreams?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one is we're fools to think that someone working for your organization isn't working there because of their dream. When I worked at a university, you don't get paid a ton of money, but people will work there because one of their dreams was, I'm going to put my kid through college without being in debt. Right. So when you value their dreams and breathe into that, like you're going to get more loyalty, even though you're getting less pay. Working for the company means my dreams are hooked on to your dreams and it just raises the tide for everyone. I forget the quote from The Alchemist, when the world knows what you need, the whole universe is going to conspire to give it to you. And I have seen this happen over and over again, that when people share their dreams, one, it legitimizes the dream. I'm not the only one who's had it, even though somebody else has judged it and told me I can't have it. It legitimizes that dream. Okay, so I just saw in one of our certifications, it was amazing. So one of the women that got certified has a dream of singing the Star Spangled Banner in front of professional baseball teams, professional athletic teams. So one of the other certified dream managers like, oh, well, let me just get on my smartphone and text my friend who's a pitching coach for the Detroit Tigers. It's been a couple of weeks and she got an email from the pitching coach. They sent me an audition tape or whatever, or like a YouTube video of you singing. They're making dreams happen because they're sharing it. So while it is personal, I think people want to be able to share it because they want someone to cheer them on.
And Matthew Kelly talks about this where he says wanting to help people achieve their dreams is human. When someone says, I want to do this or I want to accomplish that, we automatically think, if I know something that can help support them in that dream, we want to do that for people. And it's a beautiful thing. And so this is why having that culture where you really know your people, you get to know them, you get to know their dreams, you get to know their personality, you get to know how they work. It just helps you become a better coach for your people, just in general, because everyone is so different. We're all very similar, but we're all very different. And so, with the more that you get to know your people, the better that everyone's going to be, which is, hey, that's our whole philosophy, right? That your organization can only be the best version of itself to the extent that its people are becoming the best version of themselves. And so, Jen, for somebody that's listening, what is one thing? We've talked about a lot of different things. What is one thing that a leader can do today to start to build a better relationship with their team members?
Well, one thing I might suggest is having a vision of what they want that relationship with their team members to look like. Because so often what I find is individuals focus on what the problem is or the problem area and not the vision of what they would like to see happen. And the problem with that is, I'll use a metaphor real quickly. If I'm trying to quit smoking, so yeah, I'm going to try to quit smoking. I'm going to quit smoking. All I'm thinking about is the problem, smoking. I'm not thinking about the result that I want, the vision for what I have, freedom, better health. So with their team, create a dream of what you want this dream team to look like and focus on that. And when you do that, what's the one small step that you can take today that will help to create that dream team, to create the way that you want the team to work? What's the one small step? And I'll tell you, if they go through the 7 levels, read Matthew's 7 levels of intimacy, there are amazing calls to action, whether it's carefree timelessness, being a better listener, not giving advice, not trying to insert your opinion, just being curious about other people. Simple, not always easy, but simple things, simple, small steps that always help build relationships and teams no matter what.
I love it. Yes, one small step, right? That's one small step. That's all we need is just one little action step leads to big results. All right. Well, Jen, this was such a great session. But if you're listening and you're thinking, all right, I see how this Dream Manager program might work for my people and my company. We would love to have that conversation with you and what that would look like to either come and get certified to become a Dream Manager, which is amazing. And Jen has her fun little jacket on, or to implement the Dream Manager program in your organization. And we also help with that too. We are dream managers and we certify dream managers, and we also do a lot of one-on-one coaching. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what that would look like for you and your organization to help you become the best version of yourself, then we would love to have that conversation with you. So you can go to thedreammanager.com, fill that out, and one of our incredible Floyd coaches will contact you and we'll chat about it. We'll chat about all things Dream Manager and where you are now and where you want to go. Jen, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Kate.
And thank you guys so much for listening. We so appreciate you for listening, and we hope you found lots of value from this episode. Be sure to take Jen up on that action step. We always leave with some type of action step, because it's one thing to listen to a podcast and get some information, but we've got to take that one little step action to push forward. And so we hope that you do that today with you and your people. And until next time, lead with culture.